Welcome to KP classes. Welcome to the live section, everyone. So we were discussing about an introduction to different topics. So today we'll have a discussion about remote sensing as an introduction. So when it comes to remote sensing, like we know the major competitive exams are GATE, NET CSIR and GSI. But when it comes to remote sensing as a topic, for NET examination and for GATE examination, this is an important subject. But for GSI prelims, remote sensing is not very important. They don't ask much question, or it's not even included in the last year syllabuses. But it's important for the mains paper. So it's included in the mains, but it's not included in the prelims of combined geoscientist examination. But when it comes to the GATE exam or NET CSIR Earth-science paper and in IIT CUET paper for MSc entrances, remote sensing is important. Remote sensing is not included in IIT JAM syllabus, but it's included in CUET entrance paper. So let's discuss about the syllabus topics that you have to study, or the topics that we discuss over here under remote sensing class. So these elements of photogrammetry portion is very important. We should have a good knowledge about the elements of photogrammetry, like how to if you have a picture, from there have to calculate the length of the particular object or scale of the object, have to calculate with the help of a shadow, with the help of a if I know the length of the particular area, particular road or highway, whatever it is, if I know the real life length, I can calculate the scale with the help of a picture, with the help of an image. Same with the help of the length of the, like I can calculate the length of the object, or I can calculate the length with the help of shadow, also with the help of the altitude from which the picture has been taken, etc, etc. So this photogrammetry portion is very important. Numerical questions do come from photogrammetry section, both in GATE and NET. This is a very important portion. Every year they ask two questions, numerical questions from this section actually. So photogrammetry is very important when it comes to numerical questions. Next is electromagnetic spectrum, energy sources and radiation principles associated with the atmospheric interactions. So when it comes to the atmospheric interactions, like how we will the electromagnetic spectrum and the electromagnetic radiation comes to the Earth's surface, how does it interact with different layers? Like first there comes the atmosphere, atmospheric air molecules are there, water vapor is there. So how interaction will happen with each of the atmospheric particle, scattering, absorption, reflection, refraction, all these terminologies are very important. And rather than that, the electron radiation principles, like what is the relationship between wavelength and the lambda is the wavelength, frequency, and the maximum intensity of light coming, the energy, the relationship of that with lambda, Wien's principle. There are different principles are there which are very important. Numerical questions do ask from this section in NET examination, also in GATE also. So you both conceptual and numerical questions come from this second chapter, mainly the radiation principle part. Third one, absorption and interaction of energy with the Earth's surface. That's what I just explained. Like the electromagnetic energy, when it falls over the atmosphere, it gets absorbed, and because of that absorption, it causes a terminology called as atmospheric window formation is happening, and that's what we use for the further further remote sensing purpose. We uses the atmospheric windows. We'll explain that over here later in the class. In the live section itself, we'll explain what is atmospheric window. So how interaction of electromagnetic spectrum happens with when it falls over when it comes to the Earth, like at the atmosphere, how does it interact? When it comes to the Earth's surface, how interaction happens? Next is multispectral remote sensing in visible, infrared, thermal infrared and microwave regions. So different multispectral remote sensing methods, like we have to know about the sensors, different sensors present, and how the infrared remote sensing, thermal remote sensing, microwave remote sensing. In GATE, visible and thermal parts are comparatively visible. Infrared, thermal are the important portions. When you compare with the microwave remote sensing, they will not ask much questions about microwave remote. They have not yet asked much questions from microwave remote sensing, but they have asked enough questions from the other portions. But when it comes to the GSI mains paper, this microwave remote sensing part, sensor part, like remote sensing, how we use the microwave region, it's very important. They do ask in essays and everything, the questions have asked. Geological interpretation of air photos and imageries. This is actually CUET and NET CSIR related chapter. Not very important for GATE, but you should have an idea about geological interpretations. Like if I have an image with me, with the help of the spectral resolution, what are the particular spectral resolution I have used, and for different purpose the spectral resolution will be different. If I want to analyze between different types of rock with the help of an image, I have to identify like whether it is a basalt or whether it is a granite by looking at the reflective in the how much amount of reflectance has happened. With the help of the image, I can identify that. I can identify different minerals, the vegetation, like whether the vegetation over there is healthy or not. I can demarcate the water body, etc. So this interpretation of photographs or imageries are very important. With the help of the particular spectral bands, like if they have used infrared, they will be using infrared region for vegetation analysis purpose of photographies in sensors. They will use infrared for vegetation. So in class we'll study why they use infrared region rather than a green light for analyzing the vegetation. So those things we'll study in detail in our classes. Types of Indian and foreign remote sensing satellites. This is important for NET examination. Like a general knowledge part, they will ask question about all the remote sensing satellites, Indian and like abroad foreign remote sensing satellites, and the sensors used in them, their spectral resolution, radiometric resolution, their temporal resolution. All the terminologies are actually very important for NET examination. Then digital image processing, fundamental steps in image processing. This image processing, digital image processing terminologies have asked in GATE and in NET. They have asked numericals also from this particular part. Both in NET and GATE paper, they have asked numerical from digital image processing section. Global positioning system, GPS, is important in CUET and NET examination rather than GATE paper. GIS, data structure, attribute data, thematic layers and query analysis. So this GIS part, geographical information system part, is important for NET examination and CUET, not very important for GATE. They have asked very less questions from geographical information system, but it's important for NET and CUET MSc entrances, MSc entrance, not for IIT JAM, not for GSI prelims, just NET CSIR Earth-science paper and CUET PG entrance. So all around, when it comes to the topics over here, if I write the importance, so numerical questions will be asked from the first section over here. This photogrammetry, from here numerical ability test, numerical questions can be asked. Then from radiation principles, numerical questions can be asked. From digital image processing part also, numerical questions can be asked. Okay, so these are the major areas from where numerical questions can be asked, and sometimes like related to radiometric resolution also they can ask be a numerical question, but we won't be able to say that as a numerical question. It's a conceptual part only. Then when it comes to the importance in GATE or NET section, over here the photogrammetry part is important for both GATE, NET examination. Electromagnetic spectrum, energy sources and radiation principles are both are present, important for GATE and NET. Absorption, interaction of energy with Earth's surface is important in same GATE and NET paper. Multispectral remote sensing, invisible, infrared, thermal, infrared and microwave region. So this first invisible infrared thermal region, these are the major important portion, and that's important in GATE and NET entrance. Geological interpretation of air photos and imageries are important for NET. Types of Indian and foreign remote sensing satellites are mainly asked in NET CSIR Earth-science paper. Digital image processing, fundamental steps in image processing are mainly asked in both NET and GATE. Global positioning system is asked in NET rather than GATE. GIS data structure, attribute data, thematic layers and query analysis is also comparatively important for NET than GATE. So when it comes to CUET paper, for CUET, photogrammetry is kind of important. Like you should have an idea about at least the scale, how to convert from one particular, like if you have real world dimension, then have to convert it into the imagery length, or if you have an image length, and what will be the real world dimension of that object if you have a scale. So that calculations are very important. So at least that data should be known. Then electromagnetic spectrum, the basic idea of electromagnetic spectrum is important for CUET. Then the next one is the geological interpretation of air photos part. Then this you should have an idea about Indian and foreign remote sensing satellites, GPS. Also they ask about geographical information system. So this is just a nutshell, an idea about all the topics which are important for different competitive exams of geology. Now let's have a small discussion about electromagnetic spectrum and the atmospheric window. What is an electromagnetic spectrum? So we know that sun produces this continuous electromagnetic spectrum, a spectrum of energy from gamma rays. Over here you can I hope you can see the picture, from gamma rays over here till the microwave and radio wave radiations. In an array of electromagnetic radiations has been sent or produced by sun, and it reaches over the earth. So this is the entire spectrum from gamma, X-ray, ultraviolet, visible, infrared, microwave and radio wave. These are the entire spectrum. So it when it comes to millimeter, I can say, like we and same this electromagnetic spectrum, I can use different units. Like I can represent them in terms of micrometer, I can represent them in nanometers, I can represent them even in the term of volt, electron volt over here, like photon energy of visible light also I can calculate. I can, here they have mentioned it in terms of nanometer, or I can mention it in terms of micrometers. So the wavelengths, okay, nanometer or micrometer will be representing the wavelength of each radiation. So when it comes to the radiation, as I said, gamma, X-ray, ultraviolet, visible, infrared, microwave and radio wave. This is the order of electromagnetic spectrum. So gamma radiation, like maximum wavelength goes up to 10 raised to minus 12 meter. Then comes the X-ray, then ultraviolet radiation. We know visible radiation is in between 400 nanometer to 700 nanometer. Will get the 400 nanometer to 700 nanometer. That's the range of visible radiation. Visible radiation is violet, blue. The entire VIBG, or we use no violet, indigo, blue, green, yellow, orange, red. That's the visible range spectrum. So why we call that as visible range? Because that's the only electromagnetic spectrum coming from sun that is visible for our eyes. Like with our naked eye, we can see only those region of the electromagnetic spectrum. We won't be able to recognize gamma radiation, X-ray, ultraviolet. We won't be able to see infrared, microwave, yeah, radio wave. But we can only sense, or we can only see the visible radiations, and those visible radiation come between 400 nanometer to 700 nanometer. 400 nanometer is the violet radiation limit. Red limit is 700 nanometer. So I hope you have an idea about electromagnetic spectrum. This electromagnetic spectrum part is very important. It's a very silly section, a very silly question they will ask. They will ask you to arrange them in the increasing order of lambda. Lambda means wavelength. They will ask you to arrange them in the increasing order of wavelength or in the decreasing order of wavelength. So this is a very silly, very simple question. So you should have an idea like this. You can memorize it in a very easy way. Just need to remember the least one is gamma, then X-ray, ultraviolet, visible, infrared, microwave and radio wave. Remember this order and keep this in mind because they have repeatedly asked this particular question. They have asked this in even they ask this order in GATE examination. In GATE examination, they ask this particular order. So please keep this in mind and memorize the electromagnetic spectrum in order of wavelength. Or sometimes they will ask you in terms of frequency also. Then next terminology is atmospheric window. So when this electromagnetic spectrum falls over the atmosphere, the electromagnetic energy interact with each molecules present in the atmosphere in different ways. Some electromagnetic energy will be absorbed, some will be scattered out or reflected, refracted, etc. What happens when absorption of sun's incident electromagnetic energy takes place by the molecules present in the atmosphere? So from 0.1 to 30 micrometer, like different electromagnetic radiations are coming. 0.1 micrometer to 30 micrometer range electromagnetic spectrum is coming to the earth surface. They are going to interact with the atmosphere. And atmosphere consists of a huge variety of gases. So over here you can see that these graphs, first number 1, 2, 3 and 4. These 4 graphs define. So x-axis is absorption, y-axis is the wavelength. So over here you can see the first curve defines the wavelength of this particular. So wavelength is provided in terms of micrometer over here. So wavelength in between this range over here is being absorbed, or that means almost 2.5 to 8 or 9 micrometer is being absorbed by N2O gases. Nitric oxide, no, N2O, nitrogen gases are absorbing the electromagnetic energy at this particular region. So when the electromagnetic spectrum coming from sun reaches the atmosphere, wherever there is nitrogen gases are present, they will suddenly or N2O is present, they will absorb this region of the spectrum. 3 micrometer to 8 micrometer region will be absorbed by nitrogen. Then comes the next one. You can see over here, the second graph is of oxygen and ozone. Oxygen and ozone. We know ozone has a huge impact on electromagnetic spectrum absorption, and that's a major cause, or that's why we call ozone as a protecting layer. So what's the importance of ozone? What does ozone do? You can see over here, it absorbs the entire region of gamma and ultraviolet radiation. Ultraviolet and gamma radiation is completely been absorbed by oxygen molecules, O2 या O3. Also oxygen या ozone molecules will be absorbing complete of gamma and ultraviolet radiation over here, and it also absorbs 9 micrometer region also. But you can see this entire electromagnetic spectrum part is been absorbed by oxygen and ozone. Now next one is carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide also absorbs some higher micrometer radiation part. So this, wherever this dark blue color region means that this much area is absorbed by carbon dioxide. So here this entire region is absorbed by oxygen, this much region is absorbed by nitrogen. Then water absorbs these regions of electromagnetic spectrum. Now if I combine all these 4 graphs together, like the regions absorbed by nitrogen, absorbed those electromagnetic spectrum absorbed by oxygen and ozone, those electromagnetic spectrum absorbed by carbon dioxide, and then the next one is water. If I combine these 4 graphs together, I'll get a graph like this. So I can say that this entire region The moment from sun, electromagnetic spectrum, they will be very happy coming from sun, they will going to reach earth. But the moment they, when they were passing through the atmosphere, entire gamma and UV radiations whenever are absorbed by oxygen, then there is a huge area where it is not being absorbed. You can see in this entire setup, this much region is not being absorbed by nitrogen. Here oxygen, the absorption is very less, carbon dioxide is not absorbing, water is not absorbing. So I can call this as a window. That area I can call that as a window which is not been absorbed by any atmospheric gases. This much region of electromagnetic spectrum is not being absorbed by any atmospheric gases. So I can call that as a window. So all these spaces over here, I can call them as atmospheric windows. So if I want to do a remote sensing study, so in remote sensing, what are we doing? What is the basics of remote sensing? We are sending electromagnetic electromagnetic rays to a particular object. So if it is reflective remote sensing, then we'll measure the reflected rays from there. So there are passive remote sensing, active remote sensing. If it is passive remote sensing, we rely on sun's electromagnetic spectrum. We measure the reflected electromagnetic energy coming from a object. If it is an active remote sensing, we send a particular wavelength radiation, and then we measure the same particular wavelength radiation that is reflected back from the object. So that's active and passive. So if it is thermal infrared radiation, thermal infrared remote sensing, that means we are measuring the emitted radiation, like how much amount of energy has been emitted from the particular object. That's what we study on. So all these topics will be discussed in class in detail. So when it comes to atmospheric window, if I rely on the UV radiation for this much region, if I rely on this region of the spectrum for a remote sensing study or for a passive remote sensing, I am measuring the ultraviolet radiation reflected from a particular object. The radiation, like it, almost all the ultraviolet radiation has been absorbed by oxygen. Very less amount of ultraviolet radiation will be passing through the atmosphere and reaching over to the surface. So for my study, very small amount of ultraviolet radiation will be interacting with the object, and then also a less amount will be reflected back to the sensor. So that's not a good option to use ultraviolet radiation for remote sensing purpose. So the best region for remote sensing purpose is these window regions which are not being absorbed by the atmospheric molecules. So those regions are what is called as atmospheric windows. Those are called as atmospheric windows. The regions which we use the portions of spectrum which are not being absorbed by the atmospheric molecules, and we can use those regions which are not closes down by like absorption of the atmospheric gases will absorb the electromagnetic spectrum, and that areas won't be able to use in the remote sensing purpose. But those areas which are not being absorbed by the atmospheric gases are being we can use that for the purposes of a remote sensing region. So those are these window part. So all the windows are mentioned over here. So entire visible region is actually coming under atmospheric window. 0.4 to 0.7, that region is 0.4 to 0.7 micrometer wavelength of electromagnetic spectrum, which is the visible region, is actually a atmospheric window. So hence we use visible region for our remote sensing purposes. We use visible region for our remote sensing purpose, like for different like depending upon what object we are sensing on, like if it is for analyzing the vegetation, or if it is for rock identification, whatever it is, depending on the purpose, the spectral resolution will be different. Still, this entire visible region is one of the major electromagnetic spectrum part which we use for remote sensing purpose. So these are also atmospheric windows. So in this portion is very important for GATE and NET examination. They will ask direct question. They will ask you which is the region absorbed by oxygen, or which region is absorbed by water, carbon dioxide, or ozone. So direct questions will be asked. So you should have a better idea about this particular image. They will also ask about the atmospheric window region. So 0.4 to 0.7, this is an atmospheric window over here. This is photographic infrared part, 0.7 to 1.3. 1.3 to 3 is mid infrared. 3 to 5 region, this small region is for thermal infrared region. Here also 8 to 9 is thermal infrared part. 10 to 12 is also coming under thermal infrared region. So for different remote sensing purpose, which are the windows present in the electromagnetic spectrum, which are the atmospheric windows. You should have an idea about the wavelength of each atmospheric wavelength of atmospheric windows that you have to study. Then like the wavelength of electromagnetic radiation is coming under atmospheric window, and also you should have an idea of each atmospheric gas and what particular wavelength is being absorbed by that particular gas. That's also very important. They have asked this from the atmospheric window. They will be asking in every year. There used to be one question actually from this section, very important for NET, and they can ask this in GATE paper also. So I hope the section was useful for everyone. So let's wind up from this particular section. So we'll meet with another live. So as you guys know, KP GATE classes is a coaching institute for an all GATE CSIR NET Earth-science or GSI IIT JAM, all different competitive exams of geology. We are the solution. Will help you out in getting your state PSU or getting a JRF lectureship or getting into a PSU through GATE, or getting into GSI or CGWB through Geoscientist paper, or getting into an IIT for your masters. So we'll help you out in all the sense. So please use the trial class link in the description box. Fill your data over there. Whichever course you want to join, whichever exam you are you are aiming for, mention it over there. We'll contact you back and we'll give you all the details related to the coaching that we are providing over here. So if you want a study material, if you want recorded lectures, if you want online class, offline class, live sections, whatever your requirement is, you can mention it to us. We'll help you out with all the required data. So thank you so much. We'll meet with another live section again. Myself Rukuraju. Thank you.